Our next speaker is Audrey Peterman, who is the president of Earthwise Productions, Inc., and she will be speaking on the Diversity Challenge, bringing new visitors to the parks.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited and happy to be here. You have no idea. I've been talking to you for weeks in my mind. I must express my great gratitude and appreciation to my longtime friend, colleague, and fellow writer, Bob Kiter, by whose auspices I'm here, and to the Stegner Center. I was excited to learn last night that the Stegner Center is 19 years old. Something important happened in 1995 because I know of so many progressive entities that got started around the time. So I tried to distill my presentation in such a way as to, one, give you an appreciation of where I come from, then look at the issue of relevance that has been talked about a great deal, and then look at what is currently going on in communities of color in relation to the parks and the great outdoors, and then leave you with a few succinct questions. So, in terms of my story, I grew up in Jamaica, wild and free. I was so lucky. I had no separation from nature. Then I was fortunate enough to move to America and marry the most wonderful and amazing man in the world, Frank. And we had a blended family. And the year before our last daughter was scheduled to graduate from college, we decided that it was our time to live our lives and do what we wanted to do. And Frank had seen a documentary on television about the Belizean people and how much they respect and love their environment and their land, and believe that the land is the most precious thing they have to leave to their children. And we thought, well, what a noble thing. Maybe we'll move to Belize and open a bed and breakfast and live near the rainforest and go to bed at night with the sound of the howler monkeys calling in our ears, right? Wonderful, wonderful dream. And we did, in fact, go down and do the reconnaissance and fell madly in love. But the trajectory of our lives changed dramatically the last day before we left. Because on that day, Frank was having a beer in a bar and talking with a Belizean gentleman. And they got to talking about cowboy movies, and they were around the same age. And apparently cowboy movies showed a lot of the Badlands. And so the gentleman said to Frank, so what do the Badlands look like? And Frank said, I don't know. And the man said, but you live in America, right? And Frank said, yes, but I don't know what the Badlands look like. And then the gentleman said, okay, well, what does the Grand Canyon look like then? And Frank said, I don't know. And the man gave up. What kind of an American are you? You don't know anything about your country. So when we came home, we decided, instead of moving to Belize, we were not capable of doing that because we didn't know anything about our own country. So Frank suggested that we take a couple of months off and drive around the country and see these amazing places that millions of people from all over the world come to see, and they're in our own backyard. So we set off in our little Ford truck in August of 1995 and drove 12,500 miles around the country. The big deal is what we discovered on that 12,500 mile journey, because our first national park was Acadia in Maine, and I didn't know there was such a thing as a national park. And here we are in this beautiful, pristine environment with the skirt hugging the base of Cadillac Mountain, the forest hugging the base of Cadillac Mountain like a skirt, and then the big Cadillac Mountain thrusting up above the ocean, and we're driving around and around and up, and we're above the clouds. And suddenly we're deposited in this fairyland that nothing I've ever seen in my life. I describe the sense that came over me then as if I had been living in a mansion, and until then I had only seen the kitchen. And then suddenly I'd wandered into the grand living room. Really, that's the metaphor that stays in my mind. Because while I love the kitchen, I love to eat, and the kitchen is very serviceable and functional, the grand living room is a place where we keep our treasures. They speak to art and beauty and the upliftment of the spirit. And that experience was transformational for me. And as we continued on across the Badlands and Mount Rushmore and in Yellowstone, it finally hit me when I was standing in Yellowstone why do all these things have the name national park behind them? Because what is a national park? I had no idea. And I was a grown-up person with a college education, with a husband who had a law degree, was a practicing lawyer and business manager. And I have to say, as we continued on across the country, we encountered less than a handful, in fact 4, people of color in the national parks from coast to coast. And I don't have to ask what that is because I have the experience myself that it's a lack of information in communities of color about the national parks, what they are, where they are, how do you get there, what do you do there. And it persists today, 19 years later. That lack of information is what the majority of people of color respond is the real reason they are not able to access the national parks. So, I threw myself, my husband and I changed our entire trajectory, formed a company to help get this information out there, used our own money, helped build a network of people, and worked to some degree with the Park Service in trying to get this message out. But it is shocking to me that in 2014, we're still here having this conversation of relevancy in a room that looks like this, when I am aware that there are hundreds of thousands of people of color out there in the world who are devoting their lives to connecting others with the national parks, with the public land system, and protecting our natural and cultural resources. I sometimes feel like I live in parallel worlds. Because I go to one place and it's all one thing, and then I go to the other place and they're saying, well, how can we connect with the people who run the public land system? Not a day goes by or a week that I don't get a message on Facebook or an email from somebody who says, look at my project I did about the national parks. How can I get it out there? Or I want to be a park ranger so badly. So anyway, I'm leaping ahead of myself because what I really want to show you is the question of why the national parks are relevant to all Americans. And Director Jarvis did a really good job yesterday of showing the commonalities that we share as Americans in the national parks. And this is my topic, fulfilling our mission, national parks for this and future generations. And you notice I didn't say for African Americans or Hispanic Americans or anything about diversity, because the parks belong to the American people. And insofar as they serve only one specific demographic of the American people, we're failing in our mission. And we just have to admit that straight up front. Because until we admit that and come face to face with it, we will not change it. And really, after 20 years of hearing the change that's coming, I'm like, already. I love to start off with this view of the Milky Way galaxy taken in the Badlands National Park, because it illustrates for me a complete and fundamental fallacy under which we operate. In America, we act as though the people of color, and in fact, people have said this to me, leaders have said this to me, people of color don't have time for the environment or the outdoors because they have so many survival issues. And I'm like, excuse me, but I'm one of those people, and I'm here seeking to help make a difference. So I just want to use this photograph to illustrate that, we're all out here flailing in the dark in a little corner of the Milky Way galaxy that can be seen from a national park. None of us knows how we got here. None of us knows how we or when we will leave. And all of the distinctions and differences that we have made against each other by race, status, economic, all of those things, they're entirely artificial. And since we know that they're artificial, we can undo them. And it's going to be necessary to undo them if we're to move forward together in the face of climate change, which is no respecter of race or all those other distinctions. Love this man, astronaut Story Musgrave, the man who literally gave Hubble its eyes by going up and fixing the telescope when the lens were misaligned. And he was the guest speaker at that astronomy festival in the Badlands where that picture was taken. And I like to use this picture of him hanging out on the far arm of the spacecraft, working on the Hubble, when he talked about the bulkiness of his space suit and how he had to use his gloved hands and how challenging it was. This is my estimate of difficulty. Difficulty met and matched. So when people tell me how difficult it is to do anything, I'm like, really? Have you seen this? Okay? Don't tell me about difficulty. I was in the Grand Canyon. I was privileged to speak for Black History Month and Women's History Month. And I had the great good fortune of meeting this young lady, Miss T. Navajo. And she's having a great partnership with the National Park. You'll be happy to know. She's the person who sang the song on the Junior Ranger CD. And I mention her because I think that no communication about the public land system can take place without first acknowledging the first residents on this continent who were the original conservationists and helped us, gave us the place relatively unimpaired that we now have to conserve today. I like to show people this Castillo de San Marcos. It is in St. Augustine, Florida. And when you talk about relevancy, the national park system protects the place where American history happened. Every race and ethnic group was involved in American history. Ergo, therefore, the national parks are uniquely and exquisitely relevant to every American. I use this picture, which was the first establishment of the Hispanic of Spain on the North American continent, Castillo de San Marcos, and which tells that story in St. Augustine, to say that people of Hispanic descent can take great pride and pleasure in that. I don't know how many people know that the Boston National Historical Park protects the place where this man, and a man of African descent, was the first man shot down in the Revolutionary War, in the Boston Massacre. Did you know that? In 1770, yes. Now, this is important because there's a Crispus Attucks school in every black community in America. My husband went to Crispus Attucks school. So when people hear that they have a Crispus Attucks place in the national park, they're like, get out. You've got to be kidding me, because if that was true, I would know it. Lack of information. One Batista de Anza, his legacy, this man and 230 shall we say, Americans of African, Latino, Native American descent actually rode from Arizona to Mexico through wilderness, over rivers and forests to settle San Francisco and to help build the Presidio of San Francisco, the defense of America. So when we talk about relevance to the American public, hello, I think that the people of Latin heritage can be very proud that they helped establish that. When I went to Valley Forge National Historical Park in Pennsylvania and learned that my black ancestors, black people, people of Native descent and Hispanic descent, were among the soldiers in that deadly winter of 1777 to 78, where George Washington's army camped out there. They had no supplies, hardly food. I mean, there's talk of bloody footprints being left on the snow because they had no shoes. My ancestors were there. That makes the parks uniquely relevant to me and makes me uniquely American. This Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky was first, explored by enslaved Africans from the 1830s, and generations of them did that work. You should see the lanterns that they used, little wick things, and their names are carved in the deepest recesses of 300 miles of this park. They worked there until 1934 when the National Park Service bought the property and turned it into a national park, and then they were all turned away. But this is not about what happened then. This is about moving forward. However, it is important to know what happened then if we are to move forward knowledgeably together. Love this. At the Kingsley Plantation Timucuan Ecological Reserve in Jacksonville, I can actually go up and touch the tabby cabins made by my enslaved ancestors there. You have no idea what that feels like. It's very empowering. You feel like all the time rolled away, and you're just in awe and amazement and appreciation of the people who went before you. Dry Tortugas National Park off the coast of Florida, Fort Jefferson, was at one point the largest brick fortification in the Western Hemisphere, was built using the labor of enslaved Africans. When I go there, I feel my ancestors there. So, you know, people don't have to tell me whether or not the parks are relevant to me, because I know that they are. And this was part of America's coastal defense system, and building began on it in the 1830s. Fort Davis National Historic Site in Texas. You know, we have the American story of the white man, the brave white man riding west, going to California and taking, you know, his wife and children with him, and maybe the occasional slave. And so it really is very jarring when you go to this site and discover that the Buffalo Soldiers were there from 1867, I believe, to 1885. And they were the ones building the forts, fighting against the Native Americans, protecting the people who were going west. So, again, you know, the Park Service is really, really good at keeping the story of what happened in America, but we have to become much better at sharing it, because if I had not invested the last 19 years in touring the national park system, and I'm happy to, somebody ask me how many I'm up to now, please. 170. And my goal is to go to all 401, and by then I hope that we've added 200 more, really. This is how I feel about it. Now, this is a picture of President Roosevelt at the Grand Canyon, and I love that about him, the fact that he preserved so many places. And I wanted to show this because the president and the Buffalo Soldiers have a very long and complex history that many people don't know about. And the Buffalo Soldiers were also instrumental in patrolling Yosemite and in saving the giant sequoias in Sequoia National Park, as well as imagine my surprise when I was in Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park in Skagway, Alaska some years ago, and we're walking down the street doing a tour, and the ranger suddenly says, and the Buffalo Soldiers were here. And my husband and I stopped as though we'd been hit by a bolt of lightning, because the Buffalo Soldiers actually protected the gold rush town of Skagway in 1897. They were not even fully citizens themselves, and yet they were sent to protect this lawless town. Imagine what that took. This young man named Tai Singh has a peak in Yosemite named for him, Singh Peak. He's of Asian descent, I hope you can tell, and he was the cook to the Matha Party, and he was a man of such culture that Horace Albright wrote rapturously about him. This, of course, is Manzanar that the director showed us yesterday, and I use this as, I think that I think about the struggles of the Japanese who were interned here in World War II, and I think of how they must have struggled to maintain their composure, their sense of identity, their humanity, but they succeeded. And the fact that the Park Service has this and protects it for us, I think is one of the key reasons why the Park Service is the key to Americans coming to a better understanding of what happened here in this country, and the recognition that every race and ethnic group contributed, suffered, and is part of the reason we're where we are today. Segueing now to what is happening currently. Look at this group of mountain climbers. I don't know if you expected them to look like that. Okay? This is Team Denalin, which completely redefined the outdoors conversation last year when they, under the Knowles Initiative, sought to summit Mount Denali, the highest mountain on the North American continent. That group ranges in age from 19 to 57. The guy in the shades is our friend Stephen Shoby, and he's 57. And this was his 5th summit. He has already climbed 4 of the highest summits in the world. He's determined to summit all 7 of them, the highest mountain on each continent. So the conversation about, how challenging it is to get African Americans and people of color into the parks and into the outdoors there's a chasm between that and what is really happening. This is my friend Rue Mapp, who founded an organization in San Francisco in the Bay Area several years ago, and who now has chapters around the country that's taken organizing events for people of color to get out into the woods and into the great outdoors. This is my pride and joy by a young woman whose name is Teresa Baker, and she's an up-and-comer. She came up with the idea last year for one weekend when we would invite people of color around the country, African Americans in particular, to get out into a national park. And thousands of people around the country showed up. And this year, she is taking it to another level, because on June 7th and 8th, we're going to be part of a pilgrimage that's going from the Presidio of San Francisco up to Yosemite National Park to honor the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers. This is my friend Jack Shu at the very far left end, and he and the Chinese Historical Society of Southern California just summited Singh Peak, and they're very, very interested in helping the Park Service get more word into the public about the contributions of Tai Singh and also the contributions of Asians to the national park system. This is my friend. If I had a medal, a Nobel Peace Prize, I would give it to this man. His name is Bill Vanderberg. Bill Vanderberg took some of the young people from Los Angeles, Compton area, bad. This is the breeding ground for the Crips and the Bloods. These young people could easily have become Crips and Bloods. But instead, Bill Vanderberg, formed an eco club, has taken many of these people out into the wilderness, hundreds of them. And some of them are now pursuing their PhDs in forestry at major prestigious universities. Just got to get the people the information and get them out there. Oh, this is absolutely my pride and joy. Juan Martinez calls himself our son, and I'm very, very proud of that. Juan Martinez was growing up in that bad area, and could have been fodder for gangs as well. When he got into trouble in school and had a choice of detention or Eco Club, chose Eco Club, chose to plant jalapeno seeds to have his mother make salsa, got a chance to go to Grand Teton National Parks, saw stars for the first time. Suffice it to say, it transformed his life so much. He's devoted his entire life, and this happened when he was about 15. Now he's in his mid-20s. He's devoted his entire life since then to engage with other young people and organizations to get the word out about the national parks and the public land system and get young people out into the parks. And I'm happy to say that last year, National Geographic Society declared Juan Martinez a National Geographic Emerging Explorer. He also sits on the board of the foundation of the Sierra Club. And runs the Children and Nature Network, outdoors, everything. Big, very big. This is my friend Jared Manos, helping to restore tallgrass prairie in Texas. This is my friend Jerry Bransford, is actually a descendant of one of the enslaved people at Mammoth Cave, who is now working in the summers, taking people through the caves his forefathers explored. This is a group of young people being taught to be marine archaeologists in Biscayne National Park by my friend Ken Stewart, whose organization is called Youth Diving with a Purpose. And they're now actually looking at the shipwrecks and trying to piece them together on paper that may have brought some of their enslaved ancestors to this continent. This stuff is exciting and fabulous that's going on out here. Outdoor Afro again. Maveen Betch. Okay, so my friend Nadine, my friend Nataki Osborne in the middle was recently saluted as champion by the White House for getting young people outdoors. She's in the middle. Operation Green Leaves in Miami has been taking young people to the parks since the 1990s, early 1990s. My friend Carolyn Hartfield, just her group Hartfield Hikers, took a group of baby boomers aged 55 to 75 to the Grand Canyon last year. And do you know what she told me? She said, I had such a wonderful time. Everyone had such a wonderful time, and we would never have gone if you had not encouraged us. So, this is just gratuitous. Black boaters, because that's a picture you probably don't see a lot of. I'm way over there on the left-hand side somewhere, and the guy who was the first black man to sail solo around the world is also part of that group. This is where I'd like to see us come to. Vanessa and Juan, I told you about Juan earlier. They just got married in Grand Teton last September. And I know that Vanessa is a ranger, so she's working on detail in DC now. And I'm hoping that in the very near future, we will see the coming together of the American people and our national parks in the love story that it is meant to be. It cannot be accidental that on the list of best places to work, Mr. Director, I don't know if you know this, but the Park Service actually comes out as number 200 out of 300. That tells me that we have problems that are inside the service. When I looked at what is the receptivity to diversity based upon that best places to work in the federal government 2013, support for diversity was 258 of 300. So we can't on the one hand be saying how much we want to engage with communities of color. And we can say that the future of our national parks depends entirely upon that. And then not do the necessary work of giving people the information that they need about the parks. Because as I said, I did not know, and I'm an educated person. My friends who are college presidents, network news anchors did not know. Still today, people are alarmed and amazed when I tell them, do you know that you can stay at a hotel in a national park? They're like, get out. And I'm like, yeah, because all the images that we see, the few images that we see are of some young person with the backpack and the thing going up the spire, and who wants to do that? Not me, And people think that they have to rough it. The extent to which information is lacking about the national park system in the country is alarming. And we really need to get alarmed. And if we say that the future of the parks depends upon it, then we have to get about it. One last statistic I have to leave you with. Do you know how much money African Americans spend each year on domestic travel? Let me see. African Americans, 48.6 billion. Asians, 62.2 billion. Hispanics, 70.9 billion internally in the country. So if none of that is going into the parks, could it be because they don't know? Yesterday you said we should stop marketing the parks as a vacation destination. The only place the parks are not marketed as vacation destinations is in urban communities. People have no idea they can take a vacation to the national parks. That has to be rectified. Thank you so much. Oh, you mean I could have gone on talking?
Thanks for such a wonderful talk. I'm just wondering what you would sort of charge each of us with in terms of what's the best mechanism to help further this communication.
Thank you so much. A change of mind is the first thing. A change of the rhetoric. Do you have any idea how many times I see in prestigious papers like the New York Times how challenging it is for the parks and the public land managers to get to people of color? And I'm like, really? What have you done? Have you gone to the NAACP? Have you talked to the Urban League? Have you talked to BET? Have you reached out to the people who make news, who are respected and trusted in our communities? Have you talked to them? Have you talked to the groups of people that I've been showing you for 19 years, have been working at the grassroots level? And you know what is interesting about that is, it is well known that every successful movement in America, okay, the revolutionary movement, the anti-slavery movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and increasingly the LGBT movement, all movements are won to the extent that the grassroots is involved. If the grassroots is not involved, you know, at the grassroots, we don't go out when Congress shuts down the government. We don't stop working. You know, this stuff is our life. It's not our job. And I honor everybody's profession, but the biggest thing that you can do is get rid of that myth that people of color are not interested and are somehow unsuited to be outdoors. You know, yes, if it's a new thing to people and it's strange to them, anything that's strange to you, if you had to go into a major, black community by yourself, you might feel some apprehension. You might not feel comfortable. It's new, it's strange, it's not something you're accustomed to doing. Okay, but I have found we've introduced thousands of people to the parks, and there's never been one person who has not been utterly amazed. Why? Humanity, our common humanity. That's what it's about. I hope I answered your question. Yes.
Just recently, there were a group of Hispanic workmen around my complex working, and I asked whether the foreman, whether he'd ever been to a national park. We got into conversation. I was raving on about Yellowstone and the elk and how I'd heard them bugling. And he was looking at me as though I came from another planet, which I suppose in some way I do. And I said to him, well, couldn't you take off and just, take your family? Oh, my wife, she won't go out there. There's too many spiders or there's snakes. And then I said, well, what about you? What about you taking your children? And he said, I don't get any holidays. I don't get time off. I don't get paid leave. If I don't work, I don't get paid. If I don't get paid, my family doesn't eat. The rent doesn't get paid. What do you do about that group of people?
I would like to start off with a group of people that has discretionary income and is traveling. I would rather get to an answer than create another problem. The black community, the Hispanic community, none of them are monoliths. People, there's varying levels. So I am thinking if we get more people who are relatively affluent and travel, as I just gave you the figures, okay, then after they've become sufficiently acquainted with the national parks, the word will filter down. Or what you could do about that is maybe people, the whole spider and bug thing, maybe if people saw on TV a family at Grand Canyon walking along the rim or having tea at the hotel overlooking the canyon, they would know it's not all about bugs and that. But yes, if the gentleman cannot afford time, I can't help him other than to say there are community parks outside. If he makes it a priority or a value, he can do that.
Ms. Peterman,
Yes.
As a Latino American, also coming from outside the country, and I'm from Barbados, so not that far from you.
Really?
I grew up in Texas, and it was never really a lack of information for me and the community I was raised in about parks, but it was the actual visitation of the park and feeling welcomed into that park in regard to cultural diversity. And I wondered if you could comment on that observation. I think Latino Americans in particular feel very culturally and historically connected to landscapes, but may perhaps not feel so welcomed into a national park system because they're not seeing the diversity within the park system. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yes, and thank you so much. And that's why I had to make the point that, you know, the Park Service falls at number 268 out of 300 on receptivity to diversity. Because we can't keep blaming the people who are not coming if the people inside are not ready to welcome them and are not sending out welcoming vibes. It's just that simple. You know, if the parks, I care about the parks as much as I care about my family. In fact, the parks are my family. And I want them, I feel as though my ancestors laid down blood, sweat, and tears so we could have these places. Therefore, I have a vested interest in them continuing for my succeeding generations endlessly. So, you know, by 8 o'clock, I've probably sent out 4 messages to Congress and people by then. I imagine if there were thousands of hundreds of thousands more people of color or people like me activated to reach out to their Congress people. Maybe when you go to Congress, they'd actually take out their pass and show it to you in public.
Okay.
What Director Jarvis has won? Can we just let him go?
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank
Fantastic
you.
talk.
Thank you.
And spot on. One question from your perspective, you know, we have a number of initiatives underway to identify new sites, new National Register, National Historic Landmarks, and national parks that represent the contributions of women and minorities in this country. As you know, Harriet Tubman, Cesar Chavez, Fort
Yes.
Monroe, Colonel Charles Young, and Buffalo Soldiers. How important do you see us continuing on this trend to identify new sites in order to build this sort of relevance that all Americans see themselves reflected and their history within the national parks?
Yes, I think it's very important. In fact, I know of a site right now in Miami that is clamoring to get into the national park system because they know it's the highest and best they could get in terms of protection. So I feel that it's important to acquire as many places as we can. However, I feel that we already, as I showed you, are deeply invested and have relevance in the parks. We must, because we've been here. So I would also say that along with that, please make a point of getting the relevance part out into the news media. We have to work with the Ad Council of America. We have to send information to the black press. We have to get the Hispanic press and Hispanic media. This is the media that the people trust. If they don't see us in it, we're not there. We're invisible. And if we're invisible, we're going to die because there won't be enough people agitating their Congress to fund or protect the national parks. It's just that simple. Thank you.